I love this image. Like any good meme, it is iconic, even hieroglyphic, in that it conveys a ton of cultural and contextual information. And part of that is an expression of hopelessness in trying to convey the sprawling spiderweb of data, the many lines of connections, without sounding like a lunatic. To present this information in spoken language or in a film is very difficult. One often ends up bending and breaking the web to place it on a linear axis. However, by 2001, the relatively new internet had introduced hyperlinks, which gave us the ability to comprehend what it would be like to hold a 3 or 4 dimensional encyclopedia in our hands. As the internet was coming into prominence and dominance, and these concepts were being grokked for the first time, that same technology in every home was providing access to video editing programs and unfettered outlets for online distribution. And, of course, it was a pretty remarkable event that sort of dominated the news at the time.
I was heavily passionate about conspiracy and things like that, like early on, and then that led into a deeper curiosity about mysticism and just human nature itself. But I honestly do feel like the conspiracy theory is like this first layer, this like outer crust where you're looking for truth, this truth about all this conjecture and all these narratives.
When you accept Christ as a Savior, it changes your heart, it changes your life.
It is still hard to wrap your mind around the fact that such a big chunk of zeitgeist was dedicated to looking at the Jesus story, of Christmas and solar cycles, looking at other mythological figures that were born on December 25th and symbolically associated to the winter solstice. If you think comparative mythology doesn't sound sexy enough for a Hollywood-level blockbuster, it might help to remember that the Da Vinci Code had come out just a year earlier.
Symbols are a language that can help us understand our past. As the saying goes, a picture says 1,000 words, but which words? Interpret for me, please, this symbol, first thing that comes to mind, anybody.
Madonna and Child, faith, Christianity.
No, it's the pagan god Horus and his mother Isis centuries before the birth of Christ. Understanding our past determines actively our ability to understand the present. How do we penetrate years, centuries of historical distortion to find original truth?
Zeitgeist, it tapped into that wider interest in symbolism and inadvertently fed the return of spiritual intrigue and a fascination with the mysteries. And therefore, these films really stand out against that backdrop. Zeitgeist, in particular, dedicates the first third of the film to pointing out the ways in which religion can be used as a method of control. While this content doesn't seem nearly as provocative today, it was because this film specifically attacked the political and the religious programming of the moment that it was truly a counter-culture film. Around this same time, YouTube was flooded with videos detailing secret rites and rituals. Yet there were all these weird symbols, owls and glowing eyes and whatnot. 2007, the same year Zeitgeist was released, also gave us the film Ring of Power, and 2008 gave us Esoteric Agenda, two popular online conspiracy documentaries focused on occult cabals and secret societies. Here's another thing. Zeitgeist lays out all these reoccurring motifs of sun gods and the fact that these images and archetypes exist over and over again. And it would seem that this film was pretty damn successful in disseminating that information. But just a year after its release, the American voting public elects a man whose entire campaign is based on these very same mythological associations. Now, regardless of your thoughts on the man or his presidency, The point needs to be driven home that someone within the strategic offices ensured that the Obama campaign retained an outwardly secular air, while also harnessing the power and grandeur of a spiritual figure by using very specific signs and symbols in their marketing.
To the extent that I had been successful, it wasn't about me. It was about certain forces out there and me hitching my wagon to a broader spirit and a broader set of trends and a broader set of traditions.
The creation of this cult of personality was so successful that even the evangelicals who were calling him the Antichrist were paying him a weird sort of compliment by placing him on that high level of mythological significance. While the nation was outwardly claiming to be more modern and less religious, they were still giving massive amounts of energy to the avatars and placeholders of ancient beliefs and iconography. Don't forget, the President of the United States was claiming that God told him to invade Iraq. In 2007, author Christopher Knowles released the book Our Gods Wear Spandex, which examines superheroes as a modern evolution of mythological archetypes. 1 year later, we saw precisely how prescient he was, as 2008 saw the launch of the multi-billion-dollar Marvel Cinematic Universe and their remixed Pantheon of Olympus. It was this fact that caused me to react so strongly to Martin Scorsese's recent criticism of Marvel films. When he claimed those movies are, quote, not cinema, my immediate thought was, well, of course they're not cinema. They're church. Truly, these films fill the need for heroes to adore, gods to worship, and aisle after aisle of religious relics to buy.
Of the 10 highest grossing films per year from the last 10 years, 74 out of 100 are either sequels or remakes of earlier films or adaptations of comic books, video games, books, and so on. Transforming the old into the new is Hollywood's greatest talent. At this point, we've got 3 sequels to a film adapted from a theme park attraction. We've got a movie musical based on a musical which was based on a movie. We've got 2 sequels to a film that was adapted from an animated TV show based on a line of toys.
Remix's central tenet, copy, transform, combine, gives us another lens with which to view all this. I had made the point that symbolism ruled the day in 2007 and 2008, and I think that a perfect example of this is the Obama campaign logo. We could talk about the logo's use of solar imagery, going back to Zeitgeist again. I mean, for Christ's sake, the lead designer's name even means sun. That's right. Saul Sender, the creative director for the logo team, said, quote, "We were looking at the O of his name and had the idea of a rising sun and a new day. The sun rising over the horizon evoked a new sense of hope." So that's a total bullseye, no question. But there's another side to it. See, shortly after Obama won the election, and his Rising Sun campaign logo became synonymous with victory, well, Pepsi Cola redesigned their own logo, and people thought it a bit too similar to Obama's.
A central issue in the debate is whether Pepsi ripped off the essence of Obama's campaign logo for its own new brand mark.
And yet, even after the marketing chief of Pepsi gets up there and says, "No man, that's just a coincidence," they also went ahead and used the "Yes, we can" slogan. So, total bullshit, just going for the ripoff, right? I mean, it's pretty clear that Pepsi is the one copying Obama.
The statement is that Pepsi logo resembles the Obama logo, and that Pepsi kind of saw that and kind of latched onto it.
It's a bit silly and confusing, and this could easily become a conversation about corporate circle jerking, a modern version of zeitgeist-style appropriation of powerful cultural sigils. Or, if we wanted to be more generous, we could attribute it to everything is a remix's copy, transform, combine formula. But if it was just that, I probably wouldn't even mention it. The reason I am talking about it, and I do think this is so significant, you see, if Obama is Pepsi, and one was to compete with Obama, I wonder how one might choose to represent that visually. Might it look something like this? Pepsi and Coke, a surefire way of evoking a long-standing feud, voter bases, brand loyalty, and a clear indication of which side of the line you stand on. Maybe just a coincidence, but ungodly amounts of money have been spent on the marketing research that led to all of these logos. And I happen to suspect that accidents are less likely to occur at that level of spending. Whatever we might think of that example, whether intentional or not, it is just the tip of the iceberg. In 2011, I found a connection between these two campaigns. Something so weirdly specific, something that tied Obama and Trump together in such a deeply personal way that it radically impacted my view of everything I had studied before or after discovering it. Do you know what it's like to see a thing that you just can't unsee? In April of 2011, I saw something like that. Something that shook me in a way that I've spent years struggling to put into words. Something that felt so significant that it haunts me to this day. It was like overhearing a secret. No, not a secret exactly, but rather a private joke. A very private joke. Travel back to 2011 with me, to a time when Donald Trump was the host of Celebrity Apprentice and was making headlines by questioning the legitimacy of Obama as president.
You are not allowed to be a president if you're not born in this country. He may not have been born in this country, but there's something on that person, maybe religion, maybe it says he's a Muslim, I don't know. Maybe he doesn't want that, or he may not have one. But I will tell you this, if he wasn't born in this country, it's one of the great scams of all time.
Absolutely.
Now, Trump, this champion of morality and the rule of law, he didn't try to have Obama impeached for bombing Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, and Syria. No, and this fair-haired defender of the Constitution wasn't concerned with Obama's policies of indefinite detention or the suspension of habeas corpus either.
Announcing a radical new claim of presidential power that is not afforded by the Constitution and that has never been attempted in American history, even by George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. We will incarcerate people preventively. Preventive incarceration. Indefinite detention without trial. That's what this is. That's what President Obama proposed today, if you strip away the euphemisms. One civil liberties advocate told the New York Times today, quote, "We've known this was on the horizon for many years, but we were able to hold it off with George Bush. The idea that we might find ourselves fighting with the Obama administration over these powers is really stunning."
However, it was Donald Trump's burden to regretfully inform the country, well, ladies and gentlemen, this man doesn't look like what we expect our presidents to look like, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to tell you this, but...
Hey, the sheriff is on this! What are you saying? The sheriff is near! No, got a blaming thing running! The sheriff is on this!
drone warfare, corporate welfare, overseeing massive surveillance of the American people. All of the issues that could have been raised. But no, the conspiracy theory was just some xenophobic bullshit about Obama being born in Kenya and therefore not being eligible to hold office.
But there's something on that person, maybe religion, maybe it says he's a Muslim, I don't know.
So eventually Obama has to respond, and in April of 2011, he releases his birth certificate. Okay, so end of conspiracy theory and end of story, right? Well, no, because just 3 days after releasing his birth certificate, Obama happens to be speaking at an event that Donald Trump is also attending. It's the press correspondence dinner, and Obama takes the stage to say, "Fuck you, I'm going to mock you in front of the whole world," and he makes this joke. Just watch.
It is wonderful to be here at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. What a week. As some of you heard, the state of Hawaii released my official long-form birth certificate. Hopefully, this puts all doubts to rest. But just in case there are any lingering questions, tonight, I'm prepared to go a step further. Tonight, for the first time, I am releasing my official birth video. Now, let's take a look.
You get it? It's funny because racism, I guess. I don't know. You see, it's not a real great joke. It's fine. It is Saturday Night Live level humor. But it hardly sounds like something that should fascinate me for a decade. I get that. So let me give you a bit more context. The night continues with Obama making fun of Donald Trump and how ridiculous it would be if Trump actually became president.
Donald Trump is here tonight. And obviously, we all know about your credentials and breadth of experience. Say what you will about Mr. Trump. He certainly would bring some change to the White House. Let's see what we've got up there.
It's pretty eerie to see that now, knowing that Trump actually became president 5 years later. Okay, so Obama's making fun of Trump, says he's the Lion King. Trump cries, everyone laughs, everyone goes home. This is a Saturday night, mind you. Well, what happens the next day? Obama gets back in front of the cameras and says, "Hey, last night I demolished Trump, and today I killed Osama bin Laden."
President Obama speaking from the East Room of the White House, telling the nation and the world President Obama is in fact dead. It was a U.S.-led strategic, Osama bin Laden is dead.
Obama's dead, I don't care what did I say.
How Obama was killed and what led to the American forces finding out where he was.
Near the attack where Obama was killed.
The price of crude oil is now down by $2 a barrel. The thinking is now with Obama dead, terrorism won't be so prevalent in the Arab world. And
through the media that a missile attack had killed Obama, Osama bin Laden rather.
Got the news later that Obama had been killed.
And everybody is waiting to hear him speak. But this is what we do know at this point. This has been sort of labeled as a situation that deals with national security. What they're calling it is a national
A surprising number of Fox News reporters made the mistake of saying Obama died instead of Osama, so that's weird. But by highlighting the incredible similarity of their names, we get our first clue that this is just getting weirder. Now, when I saw the news, I happened to know a little Japanese, and it occurred to me that Osama means king. A few days later, I come to find out that in Arabic, Osama means lion. At this moment, I realize there is a major correlation between Obama showing a video saying he is the Lion King, and then the next day turning around to say he has killed the Lion King. This story is mired in the context of his birth certificate. So I start to think about the symbolism of death and rebirth. Oh right, this is the same week as Easter, a holiday where the King of Kings dies and is reborn. All this starts to feel significant, very much so. The royal wedding of Will and Kate is happening this same weekend. A huge spectacle dedicated to royal bloodlines and the once and future king. Want me to keep going? Because this is where it starts going overboard for me. Same time frame, same weekend, hundreds of thousands of Catholics descend on the Vatican for the beatification of Pope John Paul II. They dig the dead Pope's body up out of the ground, grant him the title of a saint, keep a vial of his holy blood as a souvenir, and seal his body under an altar. That's happening the same fucking weekend. Does this not sound like some shit out of Rosemary's Baby? Each of the 3 major cities representing the financial, military, and religious control of the planet have, at the same time, major events with millions of people out in the streets, seemingly partaking in some larger ritual, unbeknownst to most of the celebrants.
What a week.
And now let's be clear. This isn't an Illuminati video. I'm not coming at this material from that angle at all. But I would be a liar if I didn't mention that. It's the founding of the Illuminati, like the actual organization, Bavarian Illuminati. That's their birthday. But May 1st is also significant in Arthurian mythology as the birthday of the man who was prophesied to kill the king. So again, it's this layer upon layer of historical meaning and direct symbolic allusions.
In Arabic, Osama means lion. In Japanese, it means king. So here you have Barack Obama presenting himself as the Lion King, saying, I've killed the Lion King, I am the Lion King. The king is dead, long live the king. Now, if this is high occult politics, or this is crazy synchronicity, I don't want to take it. It's definitely something, for sure.
And then, what's the very next thing?
So, yes, this has been quite a year in politics, but also in the movies. Many people, for instance, were inspired by The King's Speech. Wonderful film. Well, some of you may not know this, but there's now a sequel in the works that touches close to home. So can we show the trailer, please?
The President's Speech.
Their very own website proclaims that this whole night is meant to equate Obama's speech with the King's Speech. I mean, it is so specific, so hammered home again and again. So I ask you, what do you do with that information? How do you begin to process that or parse through the heavy implications? The essential writing on the subject is called The Golden Bough, which is widely considered to be one of the most important early texts in the fields of psychology and anthropology.
The Golden Bough is a study of comparative mythology and religion, written by the Scottish anthropologist Sir James George Frazer. His specific focus is the death and ritual murder of kings, as well as the spiritual and esoteric hope for the king's rebirth. Released in 1890, it remains a major influence to this day, spotted here in the film Apocalypse Now. It's a massive collection and presents some challenging reading, to say the least. First published as 2 volumes, it soon swelled to a whopping 12. With that understanding, it's almost comical to realize that filmmaker Stanley Kubrick once sent an unabridged copy of The Golden Bough to the head of production at Warner Brothers, bugging him every couple of weeks for a year about reading it. Yet, when the frustrated executive finally said, "Stanley, I've got a studio to run. I don't have time to read mythology," Kubrick replied, "It isn't mythology. It's your life."
This from Book 3 of The Golden Bough. Kings, princes, or priests who played the part of a god for a time, and then either died a violent death in the divine character, or had to redeem their life in one way or another, whether by performing a make-believe sacrifice at some expense of pain and danger to themselves, or by delegating the duty to a substitute. After reading that and thinking of little cartoon Obama putting on the ritual tail and presenting himself in the guise of an animal for the world to see, it's insanity. And this doesn't even scratch the surface about the ways in which Obama was constantly compared to these solar gods or sun kings. Well, you take the time to study alchemy, you'll see that the lion is intimately related to the sun itself, and to all that Sun King symbolism. Hell, look at Petrus Bonus's The New Pearl of Great Price, and it's like a step-by-step formula depicting the events of all of that weekend in 2011. From the death of the king that we saw with Osama bin Laden, the alchemical marriage of Will and Kate, the elevation of the Pope to sainthood, to the rebirth of the solar king Obama. The question that remained for me, and still remains for me, is what does that mean? It piles up so that it looks so intentional. When it is that specific, it's hard for me to imagine no one intended it. But did they? Is this a planned ritual? A bunch of frightened billionaires playing dress-up for old gods, hoping they can cling to power and fortune before the world crumbles around them? Or is this the very nature of synchronicity? Are these stories and archetypes the very building blocks of our reality? If we understand physical space to be made up of a set of repeating and interlocking elements, perhaps time too is made up of a set of repeating and interlocking elements. Whatever the answer to those questions, whether we explain it with synchronicity or magic or ritual, we are left with a bigger question. What do I do with that information? And how does it change my perspective on the world around me? Part of my compulsion to share this with you is to sort of outsource that question. It has driven me crazy long enough. You guys chew on it for a while. I did not see this pandemic coming. No one did. Well, maybe one person did. Oh, okay, maybe a few people did. Point is that most people, myself included, did not expect a complete reshaping of our lives and our judicial systems, our economic security, our relationship to the outside world, and the way we interact with others. I only mention how caught off guard I was right here up front because in today's episode we are going to talk about prophecy and predicting the future The Atlantic just announced that we have come to the end of the 9/11 era, that 2020, with the coronavirus and the global upheaval it has caused, that we've now entered some sort of new age.
We are living through, in a 67-year period that stretches from 1945 to 2012, a compressed version of a larger historical epoch, 4,306 years long, that also ends in 2012. And ahead of us lies the Gothic Renaissance, the European Enlightenment, the discovery of the Newtonian mechanics, the discovery of the New World. That all lies ahead of us. It all has to be compressed into the next 22 years of time. And that is what accounts for the crazy quality of modernity.
That, of course, is Terence Mckenna, the man who, in addition to all his scholarly work with botany and alchemy and psychedelics and a slew of topics, he was truly a polymath. And he also very famously had a crazy idea, inspired by taking psychedelics in the rainforest, after which he proposed a mathematical model of measuring changes in time that spit out this 2012 end date. From the publication of his time wave data in 1975 up to his death in 2000, Mckenna spent years writing and talking about the model from the perspective that he was confident that the pattern he discovered had some major significance. However, he could only speculate as to what the end date might mean. Again, it should be emphasized that he didn't have a singular prediction, and that he speculated wildly. But he wasn't some doomsayer claiming the end was nigh. It wasn't till after his death, and much closer to 2012, that his model became popularized and bastardized by New Age false prophets and fearmongers. Let's start with what time wave zero even is.
Before his death in 2000, Mckenna noticed an unrecognized pattern in the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. The 6 lines and 64 possible combinations can be expressed as a ratio of change in each hexagram and plotted on a graph. When Mckenna mapped that graph over a timeline, he found intriguing correlations that matched all 4,000 years of recorded history. The 64 hexagrams repeat 64 times over history. Mckenna called his theory time wave zero. The highs and lows of his I Ching graph seem to have accurately predicted the fall of the Roman Empire, the discovery of the New World, and the world wars of the 20th century. But the strangest thing of all was that Mckenna's timeline came to an end on one specific date, December 21st, 2012.
It might be worth clarifying the last point made there. Mckenna's original time wave calculations gave him a slightly earlier date, still in 2012, but about a month earlier, in the middle of November. However, when he learned of the Mayan calendar, he basically says, oh, I'm probably tapping into the same thing they are, and Mckenna figures these native people spent the entirety of their culture studying this, whereas I'm just figuring it out. I'm sure they're more accurate than me, and he shifts his time wave zero end date to match theirs. This should tell you a few things, namely that Mckenna's concept of an end date was not only fluid and abstract, but also open to revision. It should also be noted that he's one of the few white academics to trust native intelligence enough to defer to their expertise. And we do know that something very specific and real did happen on December 21st, 2012, something the Mayans knew was going to happen.
Their calendar was incredibly precise, more accurate even than our own. Its interlocking timescales of lunar, solar, and planetary cycles could accurately predict a solar eclipse thousands of years into the future.
They were obsessed with time, synchronicity, and consciousness, and they spent like 1,000 years, going back to even previous civilizations, trying to put together a model of when this big transformation is going to take place.
Modern astronomers concur with the ancient Mayans. On December 21st, 2012, the Earth will be in exact alignment with the Sun and the center of the Milky Way galaxy, a galactic event that takes place once every 25,800 years. No one knows what effect this extraordinary alignment will have on the Earth, but the Mayans believed it would be dire.
I wasn't sure that talking about a 2012 apocalypse scare was going to connect with too many viewers in 2020, but man oh man have I heard the phrases apocalypse and end of the world over and over the last few months. And while some of that was tongue-in-cheek, many of us felt an immense fear recently. Whether you are scared of getting sick from coronavirus, or 5G, or losing your job, or politicians grabbing unprecedented draconian powers, or having to work and be put at risk, or that a secret World War III had already started, or of Bill Gates and his forced vaccines, or losing a member of your family, whatever you are scared of, most of us have some worries and felt a good deal of anxiety over the last few weeks and months. Felt like the world, as we know it, our societal safety net, the common ground we all expect to be there every day, all of that was ending. The world was ending. Regardless, this idea of an awakening of consciousness ties into another possibility that McKenna floated for what the 2012 date could mean. He speculated that it could be the moment that AI became self-aware. When would you say the human race merged with their smartphones? When did that hyperspatial tool entirely restructure life's experience of itself, of time, space, and of otherness?
In 2001, we introduced the first iPod. And it didn't just change the way we all listen to music. It changed the entire music industry. Well, today, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products of this class. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device. So, 3 things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device.
Is that video as crazy to you as it is to me, or am I just getting old? That is 13 years ago. That is a drop in the bucket of history. Could even Terence Mckenna imagine that the perfect artifact, the culmination of a human process of tool-making, would be made in sweatshops by prison labor, utilizing minerals mined by child slave laborers, sold to us through the most crass forms of materialism, and weaponized against us by making us assist in our own mass surveillance? Well, in 2001, we didn't just get 9/11 and all of its ripple effects. The turn of the millennium also gave us 3G, a precursor to the 5G technology currently dominating conspiracy headlines. But it was 4G, which dates to about 2011, that brought us the digital age that we are about to leave. Personally, I think it's fascinating that we've sort of leveled up our connectivity in tandem with these other geopolitical turning points. But apparently, this tech has been progressing steadily each decade. Obviously, other technologies are progressing exponentially, and very real changes are happening that are creating a total reboot of cultural norms. And that comes with possibilities for technological breakthroughs that could benefit mankind, as well as the much more glaring threat of tech being misused by psychopaths to control us. Looking into the surveillance state feels like staring into the abyss of every nightmare and bad trip I've ever experienced. It is dark, it is deep, and it is mythological in scale and scope. Looking around at the sneak peek version of a technocratic, hellish dystopia, I can tell you it is a future I don't want any part of. Deepfakes are getting really good. Combine that with our lost ability to tell real news from fake news, and you've got the perfect recipe of confusion and instability that dictators thrive on. Now, as a researcher of synchronicity, technology also throws another variable at me. The classic example of you think of a friend you haven't spoken to in a decade and the phone rings and then, oh my God, that's crazy, what are the odds, ... Whatever it is, there are many days where the algorithm feels just too damn accurate. It's maddening, and I know there are companies trying to get inside my head, but I also know that synchronicity is a very real thing. I hate that I ever have to question if a technological synchronicity is real or manufactured, but it is a concern of mine. This is another reason why it's so important to have a connection with nature, to get a sense of what life, real life, feels like, what things smell like, all the things we can't get in virtual spaces. But I also appreciate that he knew technology was not just this cancer, but that it could be used as an extension of that Gaian matrix. Rather than a tool to destroy it, we can infuse our works and our deeds with humanity. I mean, I love this technology that allows me to speak to you right now and make these videos that I love making, and I also know that just as we infuse our technology with the human spirit, it would also seem that we can't help but infuse our artwork with the future. I told you that I don't come to this material from the perspective of prediction, but that doesn't mean I can ignore the non-linear phenomenon of synchronicity. We are already seeing a wave of blank predicts coronavirus videos and memes. Right away, folks noticed a similarity between a real-life, Shanghai-based biological laboratories logo and that from the Resident Evil video game series, where this is the logo used by a pharmaceutical company that turns everyone into zombies. We got The Simpsons, of course, showing citizens demanding a cure from an Asian flu outbreak, coupled with murder hornet stand-ins. And then there's this shit from the Dead Zone TV series.
We know it acts like a virus. It causes high fever and respiratory distress. Tracking and treating a mysterious outbreak like this would take the CDC months.
Anyone who hasn't been exposed already needs to wear a mask.
China. Isn't that where flu viruses come from? Yeah. A lot of viruses come from there. International flight to China? That's no coincidence. Whatever it is, it originated in China. How long is it going to take? Well, it took 34 days to isolate the coronavirus that caused SARS, and that's fast.
I'm authorizing a quarantine on everyone who's come in contact with a symptomatic person. And the enzyme this virus is when they were using to treat malaria.
So the chloroquine. This is it. This is your virus.
I'm sorry, but there's no cure for that. Chloroquine, that's an anti-malarial drug.
No. Listen, it suppresses the enzymes. What happened? We started everyone on chloroquine, stopped the thing dead in its tracks. Now, the CDC would have figured it out eventually. but not in time.
Most recently, folks have brought 2012 back into the mix of all this coronavirus foreshadowing material by re-examining one of the creepier aspects of the 2012 Olympic opening ceremonies. You got hospital beds and nurses and grim reapers and oh shit, that do look like the models we've seen of COVID. That is just visually a very compelling synchronicity, and I can see why so many conspiracy theorists have pointed to it. So let's look at the Olympics. What did happen? Well, for starters, they recreated Glastonbury Tor, associated with Avalon and the burial site of King Arthur, which for me has always felt like a continuance of the King Kill motifs we looked at last episode. Again, a big global ritual using the exact same imagery and archetypes. Out into this Arthurian and Druidic ritual scene, a young boy recites William Blake's Jerusalem, which in many people's minds sort of confirmed the internet theory that the 2012 Olympic logo secretly encoded the word Zion. They really went all out. I would even argue that they went overboard with stuffing these Olympic Games full of specific symbolic allusions. It was ridiculous. I think of it almost like the culmination of that era of pop culture conspiracy hype. Lady Gaga covering her eye, MK Ultra everything. Did Jay-Z just say he's a Mason? All that sort of stuff. And then they announced the official song of the 2012 Olympics, and I suddenly knew that the organizers of these Olympic Games were laughing their asses off watching everyone scramble to figure them out. The official song of the 2012 Olympic Games was performed by Muse. If you're not familiar with them, they were writing songs like Ruled by Secrecy and Exopolitics, and a song straight up called MK Ultra. They name-checked Bluebeam and oh so many conspiracy classics. The band appeared on Alex Jones's show as sympathetic to the info war, and they got some pushback in the British press for promoting the work of David Icke. So they were, I don't know, but let's just say they were very much associated with conspiracy theories for many years. They were known for that for years prior to the Olympics. So 4 or 5 solid years of build-up to what is essentially the Conspiracy Olympics. And then you hire a bunch of conspiracy theorists to be your brand ambassadors? It's a big fuck you or a big fucking joke. But I knew from that announcement, as soon as Muse signed on, I knew that the 2012 Olympics would come and go as another failed apocalypse. Not everyone got the joke.